In the U.S., there's a real specialty. There's only I would say 20 or 25 attorneys or firms in America that do what we call mass tort cases. They're always going to be centered around large numbers of people that have been injured or killed by a particular product. And early on, I was asked to get involved. Some other lawyers have been handling the case, and my specialty is trying cases. So our whole firm specializes in trying complex cases, primarily pharmaceutical, also large environmental, those types of things. But it's somewhat of a specialty. So we were brought in to take a look at it. How do you get this case ready for trial?
Sure.
And then there were some other lawyers working on it in other parts of the country, that had a different approach to it. They were looking to class it. They were looking at all types of solutions. But really, our solution was to put together a case that could be tried. The case was, I thought, very, very triable, and it still remains triable for a lot of reasons. But at any rate, so I was asked to come in for that purpose, and that's typically what I do. I'm often asked to try cases for other lawyers from California to New York to Florida. So that was my involvement in it. And so as we did it, we built the war chest, what we call document themes of what these companies knew, what they had failed to do, how they had tried to cover it up, just a whole host of information that would be interesting to any juror.
Right.
And so that was my involvement from the very outset. There's a real pattern, Jason. I guess if I were to take the template for this case, and whether it's Baxter or Bayer or whoever, if I take that same template and I apply it to other pharmaceutical cases, it's usually the same thing. We used to live in a time when a CEO of the company was there for 20 or 25 years, and they invested into making sure there was stability in the company, sustainability, and small growth, but steady growth. And then all of a sudden, this new idea of quick profits and big risk came on to being taught in MBA school. This was, I think, one of the earliest cases that I started seeing this pattern, although I handled asbestos cases before that, and I handled a variation of fairly complex cases.
Right.
But the pattern was that in the United States, and I think also in Europe, you had CEOs moving through quickly. They were there for 3 to 5 years. They were trying to maximize their profits. They were trying to maximize all the things that they could extract from that company. And so because of that, they were willing to take big risks because they weren't in it for the long term. The idea was, let's move through, let's come in here like a bunch of robber barons, take what we can and move on. The conduct at some point, we see conduct that is nothing less than criminal conduct. They don't look like criminals, Jason, because they're dressed up in Armani suits. They have Rolex watches. They drive Bentleys.
Sure.
They have the Armani suits, and you look at him, you say, well, he doesn't look like a sociopath. He doesn't look like a criminal, because it's just the way it's the way our culture drives these ideas. But there's no different analysis here. The people that made the decisions on this were sociopaths. They're just straight up sociopaths.
Mike, you mentioned a few of the companies involved there. Obviously the Bayer Pharmaceutical Company is one which is often focused on, but you mentioned you were involved in litigation against a number of these companies like Baxter and Armour. Are there any particular differences in what these manufacturers of Factor VIII did? Were there certain ones that were worse, or...?
It was one for all and all for one. Okay, it was at a time when the CEOs, as you know this story, in the United States, it was clear that, they love to say, well, gee whiz, we didn't know exactly what the virus was. The HIV had not been really honed in. Well, that's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense.
Sure.
Let's assume that it's an unknown virus, but it's killing people. Do you really have to have a name for it to say, okay, let's take some action. Let's pull this off the market. So they pull it off the market in the United States, and then they sell it all over the world and kill, hundreds and hundreds of people.
Sure.
So, who does that? We're so slow to treat corporate America like the thugs that they often can be. and not just corporate America, corporate Europe, corporate world, multinational corporations, because we've been almost taught that surely they're not going to do anything to cause harm to us. People don't make decisions like that. But when you do what I do right now, I'm getting ready for the opioid trial. I mean, in West Virginia is the first opioid trial that'll go out, and when you consider the conduct of some of these companies, you go, really? You felt like that was something that you want to have as your legacy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You made that decision. And the folks that made the decisions in the Factor 8 litigation, they knew exactly what was going on. I mean, look, they shipped it to South America, they shipped to Asia, and more people got infected with the very same thing that they had taken off the market in the United States.
I mean, you may be aware, Mike, that here in the UK there is finally a public inquiry happening that's investigating all of this. It was announced in 2017. It began its hearings in 2019, which obviously it's far too late, but that's how long it took to get the inquiry.
Okay.
How will these companies act in your experience, Mike? Because the inquiry is specifically looking.
Yeah, well, they'll come up with this notion. Well, gee, we were simply trying to save lives. The people doing the inquiry rarely take the time to do what we do to get ready for trial. That's to review the documents, look at what they actually said, what was there. And most of the time when you're having a public entity doing that kind of work, they simply don't have the trial law savvy to really do what they need to do. I mean, when you start putting these pieces together, you start seeing this really ugly picture. It's been a long time since I've looked at those documents, but I just remember being a very young lawyer thinking, my God, I'd come out of the asbestos litigation where there were horrible documents, where there were documents that literally stated these men make a good living with asbestos, they can die with asbestos.
Wow.
The documents in this case were not far off from that.
Sure.
And so your inquiry's taking place. What you'll find is you'll find a couple of stars, a couple of really aggressive stars in that inquiry, and they'll be pushed back. They'll be, especially in Europe. You have this problem in Europe far worse even than you have in the United States, where corporate control is so paramount. It's so powerful. And then with the onset of the EU, of course, it even becomes more powerful. So you're going to have an inquiry, but again, really, what are we talking about? 35 years after the fact, 30 years after the fact, something like that?
Exactly.
And now they're gonna look at this, and then after they look at it, the people that have been affected, they've passed on. The people that made the decision, they've moved on to another company to make more bad decisions. And it's just we're afraid to perp walk these people. We're terrified. For some reason, we can't visualize some cat in a Brooks Brothers suit being perp walked. Because he doesn't look like some. Look, let me change the facts. If you had an individual that had killed thousands of people by recklessly going forward with conduct that they clearly understood was going to result in public harm, that person would be in jail if he was an individual. But these corporation, and it doesn't have a face. We can't see the people who made these decisions. Well, actually, you can. And this inquiry that takes place, all they have to do is look at the documents. They can trace it down who actually pulled the trigger on these decisions. But they're going to dress it up. They're going to make it sound like, gee whiz, we were doing the noble thing. People were dying. There weren't alternatives, and there were alternatives, as you know. They weren't as good. Yeah, they weren't as good. But the people didn't. The risk of death from those alternatives were far less than the risk of death from the Factor 8 product. I don't know if you saw the deposition that I took. I think it was in another case. Might have been another Bayer case.
Mike, I think I know what you're about to mention. I was literally about to come on to this, and I think this is the elephant in the room when it comes to Bayer. And some people ignore this because it ventures into a realm that could have you labeled a conspiracy theorist. But I mean, I've got to tell you, as someone, myself of Jewish descent, it's very hard for me to ignore this connection. And Mike, get into it. What is the history of Bayer?
Okay, so let me put it in terms for you. I was on the phone with what we call a national negotiator for one of these big companies, and they were actually handling Bayer. And I said to this person, I said, listen, these are the same people that made a decision to create Cylone gas. They developed it, they put it on the market for Germans to exterminate, to commit genocide. Now that wasn't that long ago.
Sure.
See? And do you really think that the mentality and the character and the quality of that company changes that quickly over that period of time? Because look, let me give you the best example. With Bayer, they had a character named Fritz Termeer. All right, hold that name. So I'm in the middle of this deposition. Just it's a bloodbath deposition because the documents are so bad. It wasn't on C8. I mean, excuse me, it wasn't on Factor 8, but it was on another product. And so I get into this series of questions, and this is a woman who's there to she's a puffer. She goes all over the world talking about what a wonderful company Bayer is.
Right.
And I let her do that as long as she wanted to. And I said, well, you seem to know a lot about the company. Do you know who Fritz Termeer is? And she acted like she didn't. I knew she did. Well, no, I don't know who Fritz Termeer is. Well, so I throw up a picture, and it's a picture of Fritz Termeer. It's this war crime. He's a war criminal, and he's the guy at Auschwitz that's trying to run things at Auschwitz. Helps create the gas to kill thousands of people. And I said, well, you might want to know something about Fritz Termeer. He was at one time in management of the early Bayer company. And so she acts like she doesn't know anything about this. And I said, and you might also, I'm curious, do you know this? Do you know that every year they have a memorial for Fritz Termeer to this day?
For a Nazi war criminal?
For a Nazi war criminal. Wow. And so here's the point. We look, people, we're so, we're living in this time of political correctness, and we're so, oh my God, we can't generalize. Look, if you think for a second that the cultural thinking of a company changes that quickly over 60, 70 years, it's nonsense. Of course it doesn't. So it just perpetuates itself. So to this day, as last time I checked anyway, they were having a Fritz Termeer ceremony for this war criminal who had been implicated in the death of thousands of people.
How does a company like that still exist, Mike?
Well, it exists because politics allow it to exist. It exists because we're afraid to perp walk people who don't have a hoodie on. They don't have black skin, and they don't have a hoodie on. So we treat them differently. They're dressed up. They're Caucasian. They were educated at Cambridge and Harvard and wherever. And so we look at them and we say, well, they're different, but they're not different. Look at the crime that takes place in the UK right now. I mean, I can go on forever. We're handling cases over there right now. We're handling cases right in the UK and Netherlands on the Mercedes case, the emissions case, the Volkswagen emissions case. When you look at that, you go, or how about the HSBC case? Washing money for terrorists. That's okay. They pay a $1.6 billion fine. Nobody goes to jail. They actually fill out forms saying, yes, we knew we were washing money for terrorists. Yes, we knew it was killing Allied and American soldiers. We knew all these things, and we did it anyway. And then our politics, at the time it was Obama in office, and he had a useless attorney general, Eric Holder. Right. And Eric Holder had represented these corporate type thugs before he became attorney general, so he gives them a pass. So here's the point: is this? We have to retool the way we think about things. We're kidding. We're in la la land if we think that these people have a social responsibility that leads them to make the right decisions when they can make a big pile of money by not making the right decisions.
No, it's unbelievable. I mean, I want to just bring it back a minute to the human level of these Factor VIII cases, these haemophilia victims and families that you represented, Mike, how well did you get to know them personally?
Well, you know what? The unfortunate thing about what I do, I didn't really. We had a whole team that did. I was there for one reason, and that was when the case was put together. I'm the trial lawyer. It's a
right.
In order to handle these cases, you have to have many parts to getting the case ready. But we had people that every day dealt with them and would come to me and tell me these stories. And I didn't fail to meet with them for any other reason that I'm single-minded. I've got to get ready for trial. I have to have the information.
Yeah.
And so that's the time I spent on this case more than anything. We put as you may know, we put a remarkable theme grid of all the documents and everything together. And it was
absolutely.
It was just a powerful piece of work. And so I wish it was different, but when I go to trial, obviously, if I'm trying a representative, 2 or 3 people that are represented in that trial, I get to know them very, very well.
What was the outcome in the US for these cases, Mike? Did the victims and families feel some sense of justice?
I don't know that they did. It was kind of we lost control of it because another group took control, and they negotiated what I don't know is particularly fair. I don't know that you see, if you said to any of these families, would you rather be paid money or would you rather seek justice? Would you rather have a day in court where you're able to face the perpetrators and you're able to say, this isn't a civil case, this is a criminal case. You've killed people. Why is it? I mean, look, you have the equivalent of manslaughter over in the UK.
We do.
And manslaughter is the equivalent of drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels and then driving through a school zone at 95 miles an hour. That's reckless disregard.
Mm-hmm.
When you have conduct like that, it rises to the level of what we consider manslaughter. And so, we can't look at it any differently. We have to say that's the only way we're going to change culture. You can't fine a company and say we're going to change anything. You can't compromise with that company. Compromise doesn't change anything. It's either a trial where the entire story is told, and in this case, it really has not been told well. It's funny. I've done probably 4 documentaries on 4 different cases that I've handled, a big project.
Sure.
And not once maybe there has been a documentary, a good one done on this. I don't know though. I don't know of it. So, the media. Look, why did the media not do their job? Here's why. In the United States, if a company is being paid $10 million, like MSNBC or CNN, if they're getting $10 million from an advertiser like Bayer, then do you think they're going to tell the story? I've done TV for many years. I've been, a contributor, and I still have a show called America's Lawyer. It's shown all over the world, as for about 5 years.
Great show. Yeah.
But when I used to do MSNBC, I'd sometimes be in a slow count, Pat, 10, 9, and about 5, they'd say, we have to change the story. And they had to change the story because they got a call from their advertiser because they knew what was coming up. The guy before me would be on, coming up, Mike Papantonio wants to talk about X, Y, or Z. They immediately get a call from the advertiser, the threat from the advertiser, if you do these stories, we're going to pull our advertising. So media is dysfunctional. If we consider media is going to save us, that's a joke.
I mean, with these huge corporations, though, Mike, why is it that you pick these kind of David versus Goliath battles, these difficult, where other lawyers would think, these companies are going to bleed us dry? Why do you take these cases?
Well, we took, as you probably know, we started the tobacco case in America. And we're, as a matter of fact, working on the one up in Canada right now. But okay, so you reach a point and you say, first of all, do we have the financial ability to do it? Fortunately, we do. We've been around for 67 years, and we've certainly have financial ability. Do we have the bench to do it? Do we have the trial lawyers that it takes to do this? And I think more importantly is, do we have a kinship with what we're trying to do. What I mean by that is the young lawyers that come to work with us, they're screened very hard. There's, if we sense that they don't have this element of compassion and they're not willing to stand in there, whatever it takes, then they're probably not going to work out with us. They're probably better in a defense firm. There's a divide in how lawyers look at the world. Okay, and it's just very clear. I don't. It's not. It sounds like a broad generalization, but it's not. I've written several books about lawyers, and I think I understand this pretty well. One is that defense lawyers that say, "Yeah, I'm really comfortable representing a corporation that has killed 1,000 people, and it's a great day for me if I declare victory at the end of that, in the corporation that killed those people, they don't have to pay money, they don't go to jail." See, for the defense mentality, that's a big day. That's a joyous day.
Wow.
For somebody like me, my God, it would terrify me to even think like that. So there is I don't know whether you have it in the UK. We're working with some good lawyers over there right now that certainly have this mentality, but there's this split of mentality.
Oh yeah.
And it is, I'm more comfortable. Part of it has to do with rejection, and this is a little complicated, but if you want to hear it, I'll tell you. A kid comes out of law school, and what we do is fraught with rejection. Okay, if we lose 12, 15, $20 million. We lose 5 years of our life working on a project. And then the jury tells us no. So you can't be fearful of rejection and do what I do.
Yeah, sure.
But a defense lawyer comes out of law school and they want to be comfortable. They want to be, I'm a member of the yacht club or the golf club, whatever gives them that mantle of being part of the norm. And so you have that real clear divide. Matter of fact, I know this very well because when I wrote my first book, it was called In Search of Atticus Finch. It was I did a questionnaire that went out to thousands of lawyers, and then we gave those questionnaires to some really good shrinks. And this was the main thing of the difference between a defense lawyer and somebody who does claimants consumer law. Well, that's the best answer I can give.
Got it. Mike, look, I am conscious of time, Mike. Do you have any kind of final words of advice for everyone here in the UK that's going through this inquiry?
Yeah. So don't let them back down. You will have people who will put on a show, and then after they put on the show, they'll meet in a back room with some lobbyist or some influencer, some political influencer, and all of a sudden they turn soft. They'll come up with a resolution that sounds like they've really done something. But if they haven't thrown people in jail, if they haven't perp walked anybody for what happened here, they haven't done their job, and they need to be held accountable for that. And we have to have the courage to say that. Damn political correctness when we can't say what's the truth. And we can't look at that corporate CEO and say, this guy knew exactly what was going on, did it anyway. And it takes courage to do that. You've got folks in this group that have huge courage just to live every day, just to make it day to day. They have incredible courage. Absolutely. And so you have to mount that courage here.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure. I know you're very busy, but the fact that you agreed to do this interview and have been so direct shows what a genuine stand-up guy you are. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Well, that was Mike Papantonio. I'm so happy that he agreed to do this show because I knew he was going to be that direct and open. I mean, obviously, I've seen previous interviews Mike has done. I've seen his show, America's Lawyer, and yeah, I mean, you got to take your hat off to the guy for fighting those cases. And I'm sure that many people like me, will know Mike from the video, the Bayer Rat of the Week video that was on one of the US news networks. I mean, that's gone viral many times across social media, YouTube, etc. Millions and millions of views just on that one clip alone. And I'm just, yes, thank you to Mike Papantonio. So what else? I mean, couple of things in the last week or so. I guess we had the the inquiry that I think Mike has given us some words to dwell on and think about there during that interview. But the inquiry put out more information about the hearings, confirmed 22nd of September they will recommence. There's a schedule of indicative weeks when the hearings will be held. And it's pretty full on, I think, compared to what we've had. But I suppose they have to be, because it's kind of playing catch up with the time we've missed due to coronavirus. But essentially from September we've pretty much got almost, I think it's like 7 months back to back of hearings, starting with the haemophilia clinicians, the haemophilia doctors from the 70s and 80s predominantly, I believe. And then it's going into the Haemophilia Society, the Trusts and Schemes, and the Trelaw School. That's kind of where the schedule takes us up to at the minute, and that takes us up to March of 2021. And then we don't know this, but I can only assume, speculate. Certainly the general thought seems to be that we'll then hear from civil servants, politicians, etc. But we have no dates or confirmation of that. But I think, like most of you, I'm certainly very anxious for the hearings to get back underway. For those of you who have read through the guidance, you'll have seen that the chair, Sir Brian Langstaff, has been pretty clear that he wants as many people to give evidence in person as possible. They've left room for the possibility for people to give evidence by video link if that's absolutely necessary, but that's got to be on pretty much on grounds of health reasons from what I can take from the guidance that's been put out. It would surprise me if we don't have witnesses trying to use that, but yeah, I mean, I agree with Sir Brian. I think and certainly the general train of thought from in the community seems to be that we want people to give evidence in person as much as possible. And then there are other things that remain to be seen, you know, such as how many people from the community, campaigners, families, etc., are going to be able to actually go to the hearings in person. And I think that will very much depend on where we're at in life in September in terms of this coronavirus and the guidance and what the government has to say and all of that sort of thing. Special thanks to everyone supporting the campaign. There's been a number of people in recent weeks that have kind of started their own initiatives and been doing different things to support the campaign. So thank you to everyone that's been you know, doing their own things to support the campaign. And you know, thanks to the guests we've had so far as well. It's been quite humbling for me, really, with the profile of some of the guests that, you know, we're starting to get. And certainly when we started, I wouldn't really have dreamed that we'd be able to get someone like Mike Papantonio or Baroness Ritchie, who we had last week, to come and speak to us. And I'm very glad, you know, they have. There are some obvious people that I know people want to come on and do the show and stuff, but the area where it's difficult, and believe me, I've tried, is, you know, kind of civil servants, politicians, doctors, etc., that were actually involved in events in the 70s and 80s. Of course, we've had Dr. Abraham Karpus, very outspoken. That interview's on YouTube, on the Facebook page. But beyond that, you know, I've reached out to a number of people kind of in that bracket, and although there's no legal reason they can't come and do the show, the general word is that because of the inquiry, they don't want to. And I know other media outlets have had a similar problem in that vein. So look, we'll keep trying. We'll keep going forward. But please, you know, if you can, share the live streams. The more they're shared wherever, on whatever platform, the more we can, you know, increase the awareness, expose the truth, highlight things, keep the momentum going, which at the end of the day is what this is all about, is trying to do that, is to raise the awareness, and also to build, you know, the knowledge of all of us, you know, everyone in this community, because it's an old cliche, the old knowledge is power thing, but, you know, it's important. And I think this medium is perhaps easier to digest for a lot of people than to go and sit at the National Archives for the rest of your life, or put your head in some books. If we can, you know, shed some light on a new thing over the course of 30-40 minutes once a week, then I think that's good for everyone. But I think for now, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. We'll be back next Thursday at 6 p.m.